Good afternoon, everybody.
Hi.
My name is Gordon Angus. I'm the Executive Director of the South African Engineers and Founders Association. I'm hoping everybody on the call knows me. Sorry, we're just getting some feedback on the line there. I have started the meeting, and I think everybody has now filtered into the virtual room. One gets so out of practice over the December holidays with these platforms. So I just want to make sure that everything is going swimmingly. But welcome to this afternoon session on payroll as a risk function. What everybody should be knowing going into 2026 from a management of risk point of view relating directly to payroll. As usual, we're joined this afternoon by Brad Wattridge, the head at Hot Mustard, and Brad will be facilitating this afternoon's discussion. I'll be participating along with my colleague Nicoline Hudumsa. Nicoline is, of course, as many of you know, if not all of you know, the accountant at SAEFA. So, Brad, over to you. If I can hand over. Hopefully everybody can hear me. I don't see any reason why you can't. But Brad, yeah, over to you.
Yeah, Gordon, I hope everyone can hear you because you're actually literally part of the session today.
Yes.
So
quite important.
Yeah. Well, today's a good one for people to be able to hear you. So yeah, thank you so much, and welcome everyone. New year. It's the year of the horse, so things are going to move very quickly. But I think today we've got an hour together, and the topic of shared screen for me is really important. And when we were chatting to Nicoline a little bit earlier, we were talking through, the passion points and why this is so important.
Payroll risk function.
So let's just mute everyone. Let me just do that.
There you go. I've done that, Brad. Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, so let's jump back into it. Welcoming Nicoline. Nicoline, you can hear us?
I can hear you perfectly.
Great. So guys, Nicoline has had terrible weather and is got a makeshift PC. She's put this on a couple of boxes. She's literally floating down the river and she's joining us. And so we won't be able to see her today, but I'm sure we will definitely be able to hear what she has to say about this particular topic. So when we talk payroll and we talk risk, Nicoline, what is your passion around payroll? You must have a lot of patience, like Job.
I do have a lot of patience, and my passion is balancing and just being compliant with everything. And when there's audits, being able to assist people with audits. When there's any disputes, we can help them with it. And yeah, payroll I'm very passionate about payroll.
Is there a general consensus between yourself and Gordon that payroll is often something overlooked, the importance of it, and it is actually such an important tool in our business and should be realigned to the risk side of our business? Do you guys feel like that, Gordon?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that payroll is, it's one of those things that as soon as something goes wrong, it comes to your attention very, very quickly because, of course, it affects people's payment. And at the end of the day, it is why we all work as hard as we do, including, all the employees that the business is represented on today's call. So, it's something that is brought to our attention as soon as something goes wrong. And it's always such an emotional issue when dealing with issues relating to pay and so on, payment of employees, etc. So very, very important. And it's, we're all human, but it is something that the employees expect, companies to get right all the time without fail. So very, very important to pay the proper attention to it. Yeah.
Yeah. And we, the rule of thumb is you don't really mess with someone's salary. Yeah. I think it's a very emotive situation to be in. And I think it can quickly contribute to a very difficult environment. So I think it is definitely the guys on the ground that sound the alarm when there is some sort of risk exposure. And it's kind of our day-to-day tool that we can use to make sure that we align with the agreements and legislation. Nicoline, from your perspective, I know SAEFA really, really talks quite hot around this topic. just to drive the point a little bit more with members. And guys, again, you know, please, the chat section is open. Please feel free to pop a question down. I think when you really get benefits out of these sessions is to ask as many questions as you can. If we don't get to all the questions, we will then come back and contact you individually through the membership portals and actually have a discussion with you and see where we can support you. But Nicoline, the importance of this being your day-to-day tool to help align to your collective agreements and legislation, how important is it?
So,
You can go ahead.
okay. So it is very important, not only for employees, the payments to employees, but even the risk on employers. So we as expert in this metal and engineering industry, I mean, we know immediately when there's any changes, and we are able to go and make changes on the systems straight after there's any changes to any legislations. And because of Gordon also being on board and having that broad knowledge, I mean, the risk is not only for employees, but employers also. And the other thing is also people sometimes, when I meet some people and they have payroll set up on Excel spreadsheets and so on, it's very difficult these days to do payroll on Excel. I mean, you have to submit monthly submissions towards Department of Labor. You have to send that to SARS on an annual basis. And SARS, when there's audits, they require quite a few documents. And that is for the audit purposes. And the payroll system is set up so that everything is easy towards the employer when there's any audits, any compliances that we have to do. And yeah, so and especially us that is in the metal and engineering industry that have broad knowledge of everything, especially like leave pay, leave enhancement pay, and so on.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of complexities involved. But Gordon, in terms of compliance levels, what are you seeing out there within the industry? Are people generally compliant when it comes to using payroll as an effective tool, or do you see a lot of kind of gray area?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, I think on the whole, most companies are compliant, and I know why that is. It's because, you know, generally companies have been around for a long time in the metal industry. Certainly our members, there's companies that have been, you know, operational for many, many years and are used to the rules. But what I will say is that we still come across companies kind of on a perhaps not a daily, but certainly a weekly basis, who still aren't sure of the intricacies of some of the rules pertaining to the metal industry in particular. So, I mean, we're not unique in this regard. There are the industries that are similar to us, but in the metal industry, you've got two sets of employees, if I can put it like that, certainly from a payroll point of view. And that's what we call scheduled and non-scheduled employees. The scheduled employees are the employees covered by the collective agreements of the industry. And then you've got non-scheduled, who are the employees who are not covered by the collective agreements. And a lot of the rules that are specific to the scheduled employees have an effect on payroll. And not only but there are some collective agreements that affect the payroll of both scheduled and non-scheduled. So that's something that very often is misunderstood. And in particular, what I mean by that is the levy structure of the MEIBC. The levies payable, the sick pay fund levy and the admin levy are payable only by scheduled employees. But the dispute resolution levy, for example, is payable by all employees. And that's very often gotten wrong. So even companies that have been at this for years and so on, still from time to time don't know that the dispute resolution levy should be payable by non-scheduled employees and things of that nature. So yeah, very, very important to know exactly what's going on at all times. And of course, any changes like Nicoline has mentioned.
So other than the benefits of staying compliant with government legislations and the collective agreements, we're not a policed state. So there may be a great I wouldn't say opportunity, but a potential for someone never to be kind of caught out. up and above the legislation and being compliant, what are the other benefits of seeing the validity and the importance of payroll as the day-to-day compliant monitor?
It's very important, I think, from a labor relations point of view, because as I mentioned earlier, you know, something goes wrong with somebody's pay, or God forbid, something goes wrong with everybody's pay. It's a very, very big deal, and it can become a huge deal very, very quickly. I mean, I've dealt personally with a situation where one of our members had specifically set up the payroll to run, I think, a few days earlier, because there was a public holiday coming up, and they anticipated that this might cause a little bit of a delay in the funds showing in the employees' accounts and so on. But despite their efforts, and despite making those transfers and running the payroll a few days earlier, there was still some or other glitch, completely beyond their control. And yet, the employees then down tools and acted very, very emotionally. And it was quite a tricky situation to manage, trying to get the message through that it wasn't the fault of the employer, but rather the banks, and that everything would be rectified one way or the other. So these things can potentially spiral. I don't want to say spiral out of control, but develop into quite a big issue from an industrial relations point of view, if things go wrong, or if there's little gremlins that sneak into the system, or misunderstandings or misinterpretations. So very important.
So I think I know we're only a few minutes in, but Nicoline, from your perspective, if there's a member sitting in this room today, or let's say it's Galen or Jolene or Anita, and they're going, okay, hang on a sec, I think I need to chat to someone. What is the entry point from here onwards? If somebody in the room would like assistance, do they just reach out and contact you, Nicoline?
Yes. So the first thing is they need to contact me, and we need to just discuss the requirements. So obviously the headcount will be important, because then we need to establish what kind of program they need. We currently use Payroll Professional and also Payroll 300. So 300 we use for more clients. And then there would be additionals if they require additionals, like some people want a self-service portal where employees can go on and apply for leave, and everything is electronically, or whatever they want to do on a self-service portal. And there might be a general ledger or a journal. They call it a journal entry. So companies with bigger headcount would want us to give them a journal at month end to make finances easier. There's quite a few things that you can add on. And then we need to discuss what the fee would be, and what the requirements would be, and what payroll program you are on, that we need to then pull over to our payroll. So that's basically it.
And I think sometimes, if this is not something we are astute in, if we are, let's say, business owners and we're playing in this industry, but this is not a strong point for us, it can actually save a lot of time, help us remain compliant, streamline our processes, and actually then translate into us being on the ground, or being able to sell more, being able to be more with our customers. I think that's kind of the perspective that I get with the support that SAEFA offers. But let's say, for example, I am financially struggling as a business. Nicoline, are there affordable options? Because it's not a too expensive process. What is your take on that?
Well, our fees are quite affordable compared to our competitors. So if you do reach out to me and you get a quote from us, we are quite, our fees are very low compared to the our competitors in the industry. But we've got a member rate, and then we've got a non-member rate. So members of South African Engineers and Founders will obviously get a cheaper rate. And then we've got for non-members, which is also still very affordable.
That's great. I've actually got a question for you, Gordon. Sorry, if you don't mind, I'm going to throw a question in. If you get taken to the CCMA and let's say, for example, it's a matter non-related to payroll, but your payroll is not compliant, will that affect the case?
Yeah, look, I mean, it depends on what
I know,
the
sorry, I know that's a really strange question to ask, and it's got a lot of gray areas, but just off the cuff, what's your thoughts?
yeah, it's it depends on what the dispute is, but it's very often the case. Let's put it like that. Because so many aspects of the industry arrangements and so on have an effect on payroll. I mean, what needs to go into calculations and that type of thing. It very often does become the subject of a dispute or one of the disputes within, a broader case that's going on before the CCMA. And then we do have those disputes that are specifically focus in or deal with non-payment of monies due. It's what we call Section 73 Cap A disputes. Strangely enough, those go to the CCMA, not our bargaining council. But be that as it may, you have to know exactly what needs to be done, what the requirements are in order to defend yourself in those disputes. We're dealing with one in a few weeks from now with a member, where there's a claim that's been made by the union there that the employees haven't been paid properly. And in fact, we've obviously in the preparations have established that they have, but we'll obviously now need to go to the CCMA and explain and demonstrate to bargaining, well, in this case, the CCMA commissioner who's got no idea of our industry arrangements or
Fair enough,
payroll
yeah,
systems, for example, exactly why in this case, there's nothing that has been done wrong and so on, and deal with it that way. The other issue is, of course, very often with disputes, particularly with disciplinary related issues, employees might have very often the parties will try and resolve the dispute, sort of mutually before they go into the actual arguments in an arbitration and that type of thing. And, what employees are paid and how that is calculated always comes up, because that's the basis on which you work towards a settlement. So you need to know exactly what you're doing, what should be included, what shouldn't be included. Very, very important from that perspective as well. Yeah.
So the preparation and you seeing it as a way to adverse risk, to reduce the risk in your business. When we start this conversation with you, Nicoline, let's say we bring our business to you and we say, okay, look, we need support, we need help. Like Dani was saying in the comment section, often in small businesses, HR, payroll, treasury often falls with one person. And I think it must get incredibly overwhelming, especially as the company grows, because that person tends to keep those responsibilities even when the company grows. So I think just the question that I want to get to is, it's a very hands-on process. Hey, Nicoline, you do take members through it step by step.
It is very hands-on. I mean, when I'm done with the payroll month end, my companies get a costing reports, they get variance reports, and it's very detailed. So they can see whatever was processed on the payroll, and I send that to them a day or two before payday so that it's been reviewed and everyone is happy on the figures.
Wow, fantastic. So when we had our briefing before we joined the session, guys, Nicoline was telling me that she gets very nervous to present, but I think you're doing an amazing job, Nicoline. It's very, very interesting. I hope you're having fun.
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Good. Answered like a true accountant, right?
Yes.
So the big thing is this particular slide, Gordon, you want to just take us through. I've shared the screen. It's all about who is covered and classification errors happening and how costly they are for the business. And guys, I don't want you, this is not a sales meeting. We're not converting you to just work with Nicoline, but why I'm pushing it is, in my own experience, I'm in a different industry. Things like this are so vital, and we think we're compliant, but the laws are so intricate and tricky that you actually need someone like a Nicoline or a Gordon. I even think Jolene, who's very astute in this space, actually working through the legislation consistently, Gordon, because it does change, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It does change. It changes, really for two reasons, and it changes comparatively often from a business that doesn't have any collective agreements or collective agreement arrangements in its industry. Because legislation does also change, and by legislation there are specifically referring to statutes and acts of parliament and so on. But in the collective bargaining space, obviously we bargain collectively far more often than, acts would change and legislation itself would change. So there's that. But on top of that, we do have situations, and there's been many of them, the members will know on the call today, where, for example, the collective agreements that underpin the levies that are payable to the bargaining council, they'll expire, and the parties won't be in a position to have replaced those agreements. So there'll be these, what we have come to refer to as hiatus periods, where things like the admin levy and the dispute resolution levy will no longer be payable, but are, almost certainly going to kick in at some later stage. And if you aren't very, very close to the coalface like we are, then you wouldn't know that. And then, of course, that can lead to overpayment or underpayment, or, perhaps a bit of both. And that's very problematic, because down the line, if there's an inspection, the inspectors are very, very quick to go back and say, but you were supposed to be contributing, for this period, or you weren't, or you've now paid us too much money, and that money now needs to be repaid to the employees, etc. So you've really got to have your finger on the pulse in that regard as well.
Yeah, misclassification leads to underpayment, arrears, and enforcement action. And the thing is if you haven't been doing it correct for a while, there is going to be some sort of a penalty. But I think it's rather just get it sorted now and get into a space where you are compliant. I think there's some things you can kind of skip on, and there's some things in your business that are just so vital. And sometimes that's a very, very difficult decision. Donnie was, still talking around this whole concept of having one person in a small company or in companies. And Nicoline, what has your experience been? Is it generally one person handling all these functions, regardless of size of company? What's been your biggest frustration engaging with customer?
The majority of companies only have one person that I normally deal with. So it's true that there's one person that normally deals with the payroll. And sometimes it does get a lot for them.
Mm-hmm. And also they are protected from scrutiny because they are both the payer, the auditor, the bookkeeper, the et cetera, the et cetera.
Correct, yes.
So, I mean, I think it's quite nice to have someone just kind of watching over your shoulder. So in our industry, we are not strictly regulated, but, we as an agency work with a regulation body just to make sure that we stay above where we should be. And that has really helped us when we've been taken to CCMA. It's helped us when we've had issues with clients. And I think this is why an association like this for me is so vital for this industry, Gordon. Just segueing completely off topic, Gordon, how is the industry 2026?
Yeah, that's always a very difficult question to answer, and I get asked it all the time. And the reason why it's difficult to answer is because we've got such a diverse membership base. We're all the metal industry, but the metal industry is so diverse. So you've got so many companies doing so many different things. Having said that, the overarching kind of feeling is more or less the same, that people are okay, they're managing, they are able to tread water at this stage relatively easily, but the companies that are really shooting the lights out are few and far between. I think the sort of approach or the sentiment overall is generally positive, and people are looking forward to what 2026 will potentially bring. So like South Africans often are, we're all sort of cautiously optimistic, but yeah, certainly no cause for celebration, I don't think, for too many companies at this stage of the game, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's a big ship to turn around, and I think you need consistency. But we actually tackled that in the previous sessions that we had around how inconsistency causes chaos. And I think that's something that people don't tend to see that are not involved in the industry. So guys, if you don't mind, give us your comments. Ashley, if you're in the room, Marinette, Lorraine, anybody else in the room, what's your thoughts of this year? How are you guys feeling? I think it's always nice for us to hear back from where your headspaces are. But we want to talk through a couple of case studies. So let's tackle overtime, premium pay, all those juicy things. Gordon, what are the most errors? Or shall we give this one to Nicoline? Who's got the biggest scandal for us? Who's going to make You Magazine?
I'm happy to run with this one, Brad. And if I can just start by saying to the members, please put in specific questions if you do have them. By all means, I'm very happy to deal with them. But yeah, sure. that now you put me on the spot to think of a juicy story, but and I'm struggling now because I'm
No,
on
it's
the
all
spot.
good. But I think let's tackle overtime premium pay,
Yeah.
you know, where errors happen, the slide that we're actually talking through now,
Mm.
where errors happen the most. What are the gremlins that generally pop up?
I think there's gremlins that very often pop up because of what I said earlier, where you've got different classes of employees or groups of employees that one needs to cater for differently with a payroll system. So you've got, first of all, you've got businesses that work a 40-hour work week. Now, where that comes from is that in terms of our industry arrangements, the main agreement specifically, we work a 40-hour work week and have for many years now. But you've got companies where the non-scheduled staff, so think of the admin support staff, they also observe a 40-hour work week, but you've got other companies where it's not uncommon to have the factory guys go home at lunchtime on a Friday, and the admin staff stay on for another 5 hours to get to their 45-hour basic conditions of employment act arrangement work week. So you've got all of these different companies, and it's very, very easy for that to, the gremlins of that difference to creep in, and all of a sudden you've got guys who are on a 45-hour work week earning overtime after 40 hours, or vice versa, and that can lead to problems. Of course, you've got the voluntary nature of overtime creeping in. That's always a tricky one, because although overtime is voluntary, one can be contractually obliged to work overtime, and it's not uncommon for employees to, on occasion, start to refuse to work overtime. What do you do about that? How do you deal with the payroll in the meantime? And kind of all of this all has to be done at the same time while all of this is going on. The next big area is the shifts, because there are different shift arrangements depending on the working arrangements of the employees. And what makes it really difficult as well is that the shifts tend to, in most companies, rotate. So you've got employees that'll work on a day shift this week and therefore won't qualify for night shift allowances and the like, and then we'll switch to night shift next week. So now all of a sudden we need to remember that they qualify for a night shift for that week. Another complication that creeps in is that if an employee is on a night shift but doesn't come to work, let's say, for example, they're off sick, they're booked off sick, they don't then qualify in terms of the industry arrangements for the night shift allowance. So you've then got to remember, for that person, they're not entitled to the night shift allowance, so that must come off the payroll, and all of these different things. So it's like an octopus on roller skates. You've got to remember all of these different things, and everything's going in a different direction. But ultimately the employees have very, very little time for mistakes when they are made. Unfortunately, it is just what it is.
But the thing for me, the most important thing here is a small mistake will cost you eventually, because it will just accumulate over time. And then obviously if there's any penalties, so Nicoline, you got a point.
Yes, I just want to mention, I don't know if Gordon wants to maybe just expand on that, but for instance, there's overtime 1.5, there's overtime 1.75, and there's overtime 2. So I had a company with a big head count that only worked on the 1.5 hours and the 2. And when I brought to their attention that there's a 1.75 also, that was a cost saving to the company, because they were overpaying these guys on overtime.
Okay. Yeah. So we've got Dani in the room. You know how active Dani is on the chat. I would like to read it out, because I think there's some points here that we can work through, positive and negative, I guess. Recouping deductions after the fact for the MEIBC changes are practically impossible, and the company will have to pay the employee portion as well. Comment 1. Then Dani was saying the biggest pain for a financial perspective is to accurately occur for these costs over the years. Just explaining the transaction to the audit team produces blank stares. And overtime on public holidays. Are auditors disconnected from payroll generally?
For me, Brad, it's not. Yeah, look, I mean, auditors, certainly if we're talking about external auditors who come in and look,
Yeah, I
they
think
will
that's what
certainly not
Donnie
be,
does.
they will certainly not be familiar with the rules of the industry, definitely not. And neither will external payroll companies that provide this service, for obvious reasons. They can't possibly be au fait with all of the arrangements of every single different collective bargaining environment,
Yeah.
every different industry, and sometimes subsectors within industries. I know chemical, for example, I think have 12 separate collective agreements that need to be managed and so on. So, it's impossible for somebody
We
who's
can't
not in the
expect them
industry to
to.
know. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. So Ashley asked the question, in what case do you use overtime 1.75? I think Nicoline, do you want to, or Gordon, do you want to grab that?
I'm happy to grab that. Nicoline, please jump in if you
You
want
can go
to.
ahead. Yes.
Yeah, but that's specific, and that's something so unique to not only our industry, but the specific point in time. And I'll explain what that means. If you want to work more than the um, permissible hours of overtime per week. So we know that under the main agreement, and in fact under the Basic Conditions of Employment Act as well, you are permitted to work up to 10 hours of overtime per week. Now, it is possible both under the main agreement and under the Basic Conditions of Employment Act to apply for and be granted an exemption to work more than those allotted hours. Now, under the
Okay.
main agreement, that exemption is fairly straightforward with regards to payroll and the pay rate. And that will simply be, well, you continue to pay an overtime premium at time and a half, irrespective of the amount of hours. So let's say you're working 15 or 20 hours overtime, it would always be at time and a half. In a time period where the agreement hasn't yet been extended and gazetted, one would have to apply to the Department of Labor for an exemption under the Basic Conditions of Employment Act, in which case those agents have the discretion to push that overtime rate up to 1.75.
Okay.
That's not very well known at all by anybody, let alone people in the industry. And so that's a very, very specific example of when 1.75 would be applicable, but is not known to most people, I would say, even dealing with payroll for many years in this industry.
Very interesting. Nicoline, tell us, how long have you been doing this for, Sunshine?
I've been in the accounting and payroll industry for longer than 20 years, 20 plus years.
And big changes, huh? You've seen.
Big changes, yeah. And in the metal and engineering industry since 2010. So it's about 15 years.
Wow, that's crazy. So if someone like Jane or Moria wanted to just give you a call and chat to you about where they are, you're open to that, right?
I am open, I'm available.
Okay, that's amazing. So we will share your details afterwards. And as Charlene mentioned, guys, this is in your members section on the site where you can actually get these recordings and all the other recordings. And again, please feel free to just post comments and questions, and no judgment. Ask us anything obviously related to, unless you want to know if it's raining, because it's raining here by me, which is really nice. So Gordon, I pick up the word gatekeeper with payroll. I think we're kind of putting a lot of pressure under payroll, but it is that important. For me, when it comes to sick pay, I find like that's a very big gray area. Do you pick up a lot of issues around that and how that is calculated and transcribed?
Yeah, so I mean, both of them, leave pay and leave enhancement pay, which are, of course, the payments that are done or calculated and then done sort of leading up to and upon employees embarking on annual leave for most companies in December when they observe the shutdown. And we get inundated with calls from companies saying, well, how do we calculate this? How do these formulae, we use formulae under the collective agreement to work these things out. How do they work? And it's very easy to help companies with those questions because we've been dealing with it for so long and we've been involved in the negotiation of how these formulae work and how shift accumulation works. So, we can certainly help, but it's always frustrating for companies to sit and try and, because inevitably you're going to have companies sit and try and figure it out first, only to find out we just can't figure this out and then make the call. And we're also running around. We sometimes get back to them late and so on. So that's a big issue, which can be avoided altogether if we are running with the payroll up front, because we know exactly how it's calculated leading up to that time period. Sick pay fund contributions as well do tend to change from time to time. Those changes sometimes are missed. you know, communication is so easy to miss these days. We are all flooded with communication via email, WhatsApp, and so on. So, I mean, it's easy to miss. We then don't load those increases on, you know, on the fund contribution side, and all of a sudden then that becomes an issue. And the same can be said, Brad, for pension and provident fund. Those are also increasing typically over the years. UIF is fairly straightforward, but sick pay fund and the other levies as well definitely change quite frequently. So it's best to be on top of that. Yeah.
Absolutely. So Charlene's got a question. Charlene, do you want to unmute? And I don't know if it's a question or a statement, or you're just happy?
Hi, thanks, Brad. Also just want to talk in with the bargaining council levies. I had somebody contact me yesterday regarding the levies that was a non-member. And this person had taken over the payroll function at a company, and they had no idea what the admin levy was or the dispute levy was and why it was being paid. And they were under the impression that the dispute levy was optional. And I explained that, as, I don't know, Brad, if you know, but I hope all of the members know, the admin levy is used to fund the administration expenses of the MEIBC, and the dispute levy is used to fund the Centre of Dispute Resolution, which is for scheduled and non-scheduled staff, that they can lodge a dispute at the CDR if they wish to. And so I think it is just important that whoever is doing the payroll is familiar with the MEIBC and the requirements of the MEIBC, because there are so many levies, it can get confusing. Not everybody is familiar with the tech levy, the technological fund levy, which is only applicable to certain associations and not others. And we do regularly send out information notes to members of the increases and so on of the levies and funds that they should be paid, that are payable to them and to their employees. So that was basically just a reminder about that. And yeah, no, go ahead, Brad.
No. So I felt like I was interrupting you there, Charlene.
No, that was about it.
Cool. I actually, on that point, it's so weird that we think alike, because I think, Gordon, if you could just maybe just reiterate, you know, the purpose of the bargaining council and the role that it plays. If from a layman's perspective, for me, I understand it as a collective bargaining for the best interest of the employer, I would imagine. Could you maybe correct me, or what would be a good way to describe what is being done there?
Yeah, so the bargaining council is the regulatory body for the industry, effectively. You know, they are the ones that facilitate the negotiations between parties, and it's very easy for companies even who are in the industry to assume that collective bargaining only takes place at the bargaining council every few years, because the bargaining over conditions of employment and wage rates, or the conditions of employment which include wage rates and wage increases, does only take place every few years or so. But there's constant renegotiation of all the other collective agreements which don't get as much kind of airtime, as it were, and aren't in the spotlight. So there's continuous collective bargaining, and that's got to be facilitated by the bargaining council. And then obviously the enforcement side of things. So the bargaining council employs agents that have the legal authority to go out to companies and do these inspections and you know, enforce compliance of collective agreements and that type of thing. And then, of course, as Charlene has correctly mentioned, there's the dispute resolution side of the council, where they resolve industry disputes. It's like our own industry CCMA, if you will. The other issue that is worth mentioning as well at this stage is that we are quite unique in the sense of our industry funds. So pension and provident fund. Firstly, the pension and provident fund of the metal industries are the largest pension and provident fund outside of the government pension fund in the country. So, you know, hundreds of billions of rands under management there. That's the first thing. The second thing is that in our industry, unlike in others, we have a separate entity which is named MIBFA, Metal Industries Benefit Funds Administrators, whose sole function is to administer funds. In most other industries, the bargaining council administers the funds as well. So our council doesn't perform that function, but works with a separate entity very closely, obviously, to ensure compliance in that regard. And it's not uncommon for companies and payroll staff and everybody else to get confused between MIBFA, MEIBC. You're paying these levies over, you're paying pension provident fund money over, and it's going to two different entities. What's the difference between them? Why is it all going in one sort of fast swoop? Why don't we do separate payments and all the rest of it? It's very difficult to keep track of. So yeah, very, very unique in that regard in the metal industry.
Yeah, it's like a mystery novel.
Yeah,
like an Agatha Christie mystery novel. It's just so
intertwined
with yeah. You have to really kind of be in the space, in the book all the time to really understand what is going on. And someone like myself who's on the peripheral, I do find it incredibly intimidating. It feels like it's just something that every day there's something new. But I kind of feel more rest assured that with kind of Nicoline, I can go to pick up the phone and say, hey, obviously can't do this too many times because then it's abusing the situation. But at least someone's there to say, you know what, we've got your back. Let's help you out. But the big thing about the session is I didn't want us to get too into the technicality too much, because I feel like it is getting close to 4 o'clock and it is a Tuesday afternoon. It's incredibly hot, I think, with everywhere everybody is. I think I wanted us just to drive the message of this being how important payroll is for risk aversion. Am I saying it right, Gordon? Risk aversion? Yep. Yes, yep. That's right. And also for gatekeeping, because it's a way that you can actually save money in your business. It gives you the reassurance that should you be taken to CCMA, that there is a way of protecting yourself in your business. And it is something that I feel it should be something done correctly from the beginning. But I know from the businesses that I've run is that's not always possible. So the big thing, Nicoline, that you're telling us is no matter where we are and how far down the road, you would be able to kind of navigate us through this, right?
I will be able to help you, navigate you, assist you. I'm on the phone. You guys can reach me anytime.
Fantastic, fantastic. What happens when businesses are affected by external elements, Gordon, and finance becomes really tight? This is, compliance is something that generally suffers because we're not a police state. But how important really is it? I mean, what do we do then, Gordon? What would you do?
Yeah, so I mean, looking from a risk mitigation or risk management point of view, and to illustrate the importance of this, I will drill down into quite a lot of detail here, but just for illustrative purposes,
course,
you might find yourself in a situation as a business where things aren't going well. You've had to implement something like short time, it goes without saying that if you're implementing short time, you're doing so because things are looking, quite challenging from a financial point of view. And you need to know the detail there because it can become crucially important. By that, I mean that depending on the amount of hours that you are working during that short-time working arrangement, that can affect your shift accumulation, which in turn could affect the amount of money that actually gets paid out in the form of leave pay and leave enhancement pay to the employees. So you could, if you don't know the detail there, you could run the payroll, for example, and it could automatically calculate full shifts for that period, and you'll find that you've then overpaid the employees. And I'm obviously by no means bringing this to everybody's attention because I don't want to, because I want you to pay your employees less. But the fact of the matter is that in those sorts of situations, every cent counts. And it is a cost saving that could be realized potentially if you know what you're doing, you know the implications of the agreement and how it affects payroll, that could be realized, as opposed to if you just don't know about it, you end up paying and you could be none the wiser. And that could, in some cases, really make or break, certain businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. The big thing that kind of stuck out for me is that it's not an informal arrangement, that the short time and layoffs are a regulated process. So sometimes we feel we kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. Our revenue in our business is getting tighter and tighter. Our margins are getting less, but we got nowhere out. But the feeling that I do get is that there are regulated processes to help maybe reduce the amount of time your staff are on site, also help relieve a little bit, from a cash flow perspective for the business. Am I getting that right, Gordon?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a good way of illustrating the what we can offer in terms of running with the payroll and assisting in that regard, and also supporting the HR or IR function. So we know exactly how you can practically implement the short-time arrangements if you do, as an example, get into this difficult spot. We can deal with all the questions that may come your way from your staff or from their union, and even the arguments and disputes that may come potentially from the union we can deal with, while at the same time also knowing and guiding you how this affects the payroll and at the end of the day, the bottom line in terms of the company. I mean, payroll for most companies, if not all companies, is probably the biggest cost aspect of the business. So you want to be able to make sure that things are running smoothly and properly there as well.
Yeah, because things happen and you need the backup. I mean, if you're being inspected, you let's say, for example, the MEIBC inspections come through, they're going to rely on the payroll data, right? Like you've got on point number 1 here. And I think we spoke about this initially in the beginning of the session, offline. And I think you're going to need to have that information readily available. And if, like Nicoline says, if you've got an Excel sheet and it doesn't account or unable to work through the complexities, you're going to be in a bit of trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are seeing the sort of the rumblings, as it were, of a huge increase and spike in compliance inspections from the Department of Labour. Now, we all know that they're specifically on the warpath with regards to employment equity inspections and employment equity compliance visits and that type of thing. And I wouldn't be surprised if that doesn't filter down into entities like the MEIBC. Obviously, the MEIBC wouldn't be inspecting on the employment equity side, but it's very, very likely that they would up their game in terms of inspections with regards to pay rates, pension and provident fund deductions and contributions and the like. So very, very important to have accurate information on file, so that if you do get inspected, it's simply a case of saying, well, here's the information. They go through it, they see everything's about board and done correctly, etc., and off they move to the next company that they're going to be inspecting. You don't want to be in a situation where they come back and they say things have been done incorrectly, and we now want you to follow the compliance order that we're now issuing and all the rest of it, if at all possible. But if that does happen, we can, of course, also assist you in that scenario as well.
Yeah. Charlene, you had your hand raised. Is there another point you wanted to raise for us?
Yes, I want to ask a question relating to the inspections now as well. And that, Gordon, what do you think is the most common payroll error that's picked up during labour inspections? You have mentioned the pay rates, but what else?
Yeah, I think pay rates, very often calculation of leave pay and leave enhancement pay, towards, well, not towards the end of the year, because of course you're still calculating and paying that out. But in the beginning of the new year, employees come back and they may want to dispute how much they were paid. Perhaps it doesn't always have to be a dispute. Very often employees will come back and they'll simply query, why was I paid this? I was expecting more. Has this been calculated correctly, etc.? And it's very, very easy to sometimes it's not even a case of not knowing, what the correct answer is, the correct calculation, but it doesn't take a lot to shake one's confidence. If you get a lot of employees at your door saying, we don't think you've done this correctly, even if you have, it's still nice to be able to pick up a phone and rely on somebody to guide you through that. But I would say calculation of leave pay, leave enhancement pay, wage rates, and then the who's contributing the correct levies. And also, the things like the correct calculation of night shift allowances and that type of thing. Those are the main areas that tend to go wrong from time to time.
I also just want to mention that overtime hours is something that is also often neglected. And I don't want to say many companies, but it happens quite often that excessive overtime hours are worked and it's not really, realized by the office, or supervisor is not recording the hours correctly. And yes, I do know that companies, I don't want to say fairly often, but that this is kind of a troubled area as well that needs to be looked at.
I kind of feel, thanks so much, Charlene. I kind of feel Oh, sorry. Again, I
Mm,
interrupt,
we-
Charlene.
Yes, we've got a question under the Q&A that's been
Yeah.
missed.
Yeah, no, I'll grab that now.
Will you grab that one? Okay, I think it would be good for Nicolene to answer that one for us. Thanks so much, Brad.
Sorry, Charlene. Yeah, next time we'll get our mojo to mix better. But the question was from Lynette, and it's please explain technological fund. Technology, what's that? Have you ever seen that meme where that guy sits in the back of his car? It's so
Technology.
cute.
Brad, that wasn't the
Technologia.
question. The question
Oh,
I'm referring
okay.
to is another one. But
Oh,
yeah,
shit, okay.
the technological levy is also referred to as the tech levy. This is a levy that's only applicable to associations affiliated to SAEFA. So if a company is a member of an association that's affiliated to SAEFA, they are obligated to pay over this tech levy. And what the technological levy is used to fund is a bursary scheme that SAEFA provides. So that is their industry bursary scheme. They choose who will be receiving the bursary, and they pay for, I don't know how many people, the individual or individuals who receive the bursary. So yes, that is not applicable to SAEFA members.
Okay, fantastic. And Lynette, I hope that helped. And the other question, Charlene, you said I missed?
Yes, there's one under the Q&A, and that is we will be changing our weekly shift paid employees to monthly salary. How does this affect the sick pay, admin, dispute levies, etc.?
That's a good
Nicolene,
one.
yeah, it is. Nicolene, would you mind answering that one for us?
Yes,
Please.
I had a company that was on weekly. So we changed them over to monthly. So if you look at you get the tables from the MERBC that says what your sick pay and dispute levy will be if it's monthly or weekly. So it's only a change on the system where you change the method of calculation. So now the method of calculation will not be calculating on a weekly basis, and the fee will change, and it will now only be calculated on a monthly basis. So that's just a system set up that you do on the payroll.
Can
Fantastic.
I also add to that, Brad? Just
Yeah.
just to add that when one changes from weekly to monthly payroll systems, then or payroll frequency, should I say, one big change other than that Nicolene has correctly identified is that your shift accumulation will work very, very differently. Effectively, you'll stop counting shifts and you'll pay over leave enhancement pay as a compulsory 13th check in December. So it becomes administratively easier, but potentially a little bit more expensive, very slightly more expensive, particularly if you've got a lot of employees who are absent without permission and that type of thing during the course of the year. Of course, the way to manage that is just to effectively manage that side of things rather than worry too much about the money, because there will be a difference, although it's not likely to be huge. But that calculation will change. If you need more clarity, obviously we can get into the detail.
So Danny, we've got 6 minutes left of the session, but we would love you to ask your question. Brother, if you want to unmute.
Thanks, Brad. Gordon, just adding there, I think, I don't know, you're supposed to be on chosen things, but I would advise not changing over during a financial year. I think to account for part of it on the weekly basis and the other on the monthly basis. And then my question there, Gordon, is should employees then on a monthly structure join throughout the year, that 13th check should then obviously be a portion for, as it would accrue monthly, if I have to take or calculate it in my head.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Donnie. So
Making
yeah, we
sense,
can
Gordon.
certainly assist with that, but it would be a pro rata amount that then would be paid out at the end of the first year, where, because the person will have joined at some point throughout the year and hasn't, by the time they go on leave in December, completed a full year. So you're right, yeah.
Sorry, just a quick one, Brad. Sorry. With regards to that, Gordon, is there a salary threshold, where someone that is paid on a salary basis no longer needs to comply with these things, with especially regards to the mandatory 13th check? In our case, I know at certain level, then it becomes at the company discretion.
Yeah, it's not dictated by the amount that is paid to the employee or whether they're paid monthly or weekly. It's whether they're scheduled or non-scheduled. So scheduled employees are covered by the main agreement, irrespective of how much they earn or when they get paid, and that will provide for leave and answer pay in the way that we're fairly familiar with. If you're a non-scheduled employee, then there's two things. Firstly, there's no compulsory bonus under things like the Basic Conditions of Employment Act. So you would look to your contract of employment and company policy in that regard to look for the regulations there. And then secondly, there is an earnings threshold under the Basic Conditions of Employment Act. And effectively what that means is if you're paid above that threshold, then many sections under the Basic Conditions of Employment Act don't apply. Things like overtime, payment for public holidays and that type of thing. And we're sitting at 200 and something thousand rand a year, but I could get the exact figure. You can Google it and it'll come up. So there's that distinction.
Great, Gordon. Thank you. So Donnie says thumbs up. He's happy with that answer. And guys, yeah, we've got 3 minutes left. The topic for today was what every employer should get right in 2026. Nicoline, what's your top 3 things that every employer should get right in 2026 when it comes to payroll? Putting you on the spot.
Well, compliance is the first thing. I mean, it's very important, especially with all the Department of Labor, everything that's going on. Being compliant is number one. And I mean, you want to make life easier for yourself. So why would you want to struggle if there's someone that can do the struggling for you? I mean, we are in the industry. We are expert in this field. So that's another thing. Make life easier for you. Yes,
Yeah.
I can't think of a third one.
I'll put you on the spot there, just to make sure that you had a great session today, Nicoline, and that you'll remember this session forever and ever. But I think compliance is really important, and sometimes I believe we think we're a compliant business. It's like we think we're great citizens, but we skip every red robot that we can. It's that kind of story, and I think it's to fix our own backyard and make sure that our businesses are running with the best support that you could possibly get. And Nicoline highlighted that this is it doesn't have to be a hugely difficult thing to do. It can be simplified. Gordon, last 2 minutes, can we give you 3 or do you want to just go for 1?
Well, I just want to make perhaps a slightly different point, and that is that while Nicoline has explained that we can't offer a straightforward cost because the pricing model is based on the amounts of employees, how much of a changeover you need from one system to the other, and the kind of granular detail that would affect that particular aspect. But we are very, very competitively priced, we can assure you. But one must also consider the kind of opportunity cost. I hope I'm using that term correctly. Of if you're a small business, particularly, and you're the owner or you're a small team that run the business, a lot of your time is taken up dealing with payroll issues. I'm sure everybody will agree. So it's not just about the cost; it's about being able to free up your own time to work then on your business, interact with customers, deal with their queries, and do the billion other things that we have to do as small business owners, from day to day. The larger businesses too, you've got teams that run with the payroll, but they are also doing the same thing, perhaps just, in a more specific sort of way. You can free up a lot of their time to deal with other more important issues while, we can deal with the payroll for you. And, obviously it's easier for us to do because we don't need to go out and find what these changes are. We are working with them every day, so we know them sort of inherently, if you will.
Yeah, you kind of know the detail. I mean, God is in the detail, and you have all of that because you deal, like you say, you deal with it every day. Gordon, would you like to wrap this up in a bow? Because there's always time for a bow.
Yeah, 100%. I think, first of all, thank you to you, Brad. Thanks, Nicoline, so much. Thanks, Charlene, and thanks to everybody who came through on the call today. As Nicoline has said, and I think Charlene, we'll echo it, that if you have any queries, please give us a shout. We'll very, very happily help you. And certainly something that I think needs to be very, very seriously considered. It can really enhance your membership and make your lives, I think, at the end of the day, a lot easier. So you can focus on the business that you have to this year.
That's us. Shall we close and go and dance in the rain? I'm literally going to go and stand in the rain now, guys.
Yeah, it's about to pour down here as well.
It started here. Yeah.
Very, very dark
Gosh,
clouds.
what a
here,
gift, eh? Thank you very much, everyone. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I don't know if you want to close up, Gordon.
100%. Yeah. Once more, guys, thanks very much for joining us. And, compliments of the season, all the very, very best for the year ahead. Let it be a really good, productive, and profitable year.
Awesome.
Thanks very much, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.